Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this online lecture series of the Philippine Normal University, PNU Talks. I am Maria Celin H. Mendoza of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process. I am a graduate of the PNU Batch 2007 under the BSE Values Education major. So today, I will be presenting a brief introduction on conflict sensitivity and peace-promoting approaches towards a culture of peace. But before I start my presentation, I would like to give a short background with regard to the mandate of our office. So the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, or OPAP, is the office mandated to oversee, coordinate, and integrate the implementation of the comprehensive peace process. The agency was created through Executive Order Number 125, Series of 1993, which was later amended in 2001 with the signing of Executive Order Number 3. It is a reaffirmation of the government's commitment to achieving just and comprehensive peace process through the processes we've known as the six paths to peace. The six paths to peace are interrelated and not mutually exclusive, and must therefore be pursued simultaneously in a coordinated and integrated fashion. They shall include, but may not be limited to, the following. First is the pursuit of social, economic, and political reforms. Second is the consensus building and empowerment for peace. Third is the peaceful negotiated settlement with different rebel groups. Fourth is programs for reconciliation, reintegration into mainstream society. Fifth is addressing the concerns arising from continuing armed hostilities. And then lastly is the building and nurturing a climate conducive to peace. The overall vision of the office is a just and lasting peace for the nation and for all Filipinos. Okay, so moving to our topic for the day. In consonance with the Peace and Development Agenda number 5, which delves on building a culture of peace and conflict sensitivity towards positive peace and sustainable development, OPAP has been embarking on mainstreaming conflict sensitive and peace promoting, or what we call the CSPP concepts, to the policies, plans, programs, and projects of the national and local agencies. As partners in the peace and development efforts, OPAP aims to capacitate through orientation or training the national agencies, the local government agencies, including the policy and planning mechanisms, the different bodies, institutions, and sectors, which includes the academe, and it aimed to aid them in their policies, plans, and implementations of their interventions, especially in these conflict-affected areas. The CSPP is broad, but over the years, OPAP has developed tools translating the CSPP concepts into processes and mechanisms designed to promote and build the peace from the national down to the local levels. OPAP has been utilizing the CSPP approaches, tools, and practice in crafting our policies and carrying out our programs, projects, and interventions. So here are the three important concepts that we must be familiarized with, as these are the basic tenets in which the CSPP was anchored on. First is the concept of conflict. Here are some of the common definitions of conflict. It emphasizes on the relationship of individuals, parties, and groups, which due to incompatibility of intentions and goals, it leads and creates conflict. Most of us perceive conflict as something negative and obstructive, but we must understand that in society where there exist different views, beliefs, and goals that collide, it is very normal and natural. In any relationship, conflict is a normal part because as long as there are people in different views, ideals, and goals, conflict will always happen because each one of us is unique. Our uniqueness and difference would always produce conflict in certain situations. But it is with conflict that we are encouraged to reflect, examine our relationships with others, and look for ways within which we can manage, resolve, and transform the conflict. Thus, it is with conflict sensitivity While we accept that conflict naturally exists, we tend to mitigate the conflict by understanding that each of us is different and that we respect that difference. The second concept is violence. It is defined as actions, words, attitudes, structures, or systems that cause physical, psychological, social, or environmental damage. Violence is the tangible manifestation of conflict because it involves harm and damage on people or in a community. Examples of violence are wars, hate crimes, terrorism, but violence can also exist inside our homes. Like, for example, in families where women and children are experiencing abuse. Structures and systems also can inflict conflict. For example, it may include policies that only favors the rich or the powerful and does not extend to other vulnerable groups, making it more difficult for them to access their basic needs. Or the implementation of certain projects that favors only the particular sector or a group. While conflict is a natural, it is important that this conflict would not escalate or turn into violence. Our third concept is peace. However, since each of us came from different origins, defining peace also can be distinct depending on each other's beliefs, desires, or goals. Here are some examples of what peace is for them. For the economist, it defines peace as eradication of poverty and economic well-being of the people. For the politicians, it sees it as the outcome of democracy resulting from good governance. The security sector believes that there is peace if there is no war. Community organizers understand it as resolving conflicts and fair distribution of justice, while lawyers take it as when justice is served, there is peace. Thus, common to all of this, peace is defined as the absence of personal violence or negative peace, and it is also the absence of structural violence and the recognition of the presence of positive peace. Positive peace is described as attitudes, behaviors, institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies, and it also focuses on environment and communities to be more resilient and increase their capacity to absorb and recover from an internal or external collapse or shocks. Increased presence of positive peace is also a very effective way to reduce potential future violence. A well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, acceptance of the rights of others, low level of corruption are some examples that build a positive peace. So conflict is not necessarily negative or destructive. Problems arise when nonviolent conflicts return violent. The surprise about the violent conflict is not that it occurs, but that we watch it develop for so long and do nothing about it. That is the analysis of that is the analysis that conflict is not necessarily negative or destructive. So now, what are the different responses to conflict? The government and the peace workers, we are bound to respond and manage conflict. But given the different mandates of the agencies and bodies, it varies into three different ways. First, working around conflict. Working around conflict is wherein we treat conflict as an impediment or negative externality that is to be avoided. So that programs continue without being negatively affected by conflict, these are the programs and interventions that we implement in conflict-affected and conflict-vulnerable areas, but do not directly nor indirectly respond to conflict. But since these interventions are implemented in these areas, it is recommended at least to be conflict sensitive so that the initiative will work inside the conflict. Now, in working in conflict, there is a recognition of the link between programs and conflict and making attempts to mitigate conflict-related risks so that work is not negatively affected by or have an adverse effect on conflict dynamics. This is also known as the do no harm approach or DNH. The DNH is an approach that examines how an intervention contributes to the escalation of conflicts or tensions in a community or vice versa, how it enhances unity and social cohesion among the people, and working in conflict is a response that promotes conflict sensitivity at least, but need to level up as peace building to be effective. The third one is working on conflict. In this response, there is that deliberate attempts to design policy and programs that seek to exploit opportunities to positively affect conflict dynamics and address key conflict factors. When working on conflict, it is both promoting conflict sensitivity and at the same time peace building. Most of the OPAP work are ensured to be working on conflict. So, what is CSPP? In OPAP, enabled to respond and work on conflict, we have adopted the conflict sensitivity and peace promotion approaches to make sure our interventions are conflict sensitivity and peace building. The CSPP entails the understanding of the context in which the agency or the institution is operating, particularly the dynamics of intergroup relations, understanding the interaction between the interventions and the context, and acting upon this understanding in order to avoid negative impact and maximize positive impacts of programs, projects, and or activities. The application of the CSPP approaches recognizes the ability of the organization to look into the conflict, understand what drives this conflict, the effects it has on its environment, and to the organization's interventions. This is to help the organization make better judgment and propose effective peace-building interventions in the area it's operating, and to ensure that implementation of the interventions are able to minimize the negative or the conflict impact and maximize the positive peace impact of the intervention on a particular context of the conflict. So, in a nutshell, we utilized conflict-sensitive approaches to understand the roots of conflict, to enable us to propose interventions and addresses and or at least mitigate the roots of conflict. This diagram illustrates how we work on the conflict and how each approaches support each other. However, this diagram depicts the process and or phases which OPAP adapts in making and ensuring that our interventions are conflict sensitive. So first, we analyze the conflict. Second, we understand the intervention. Third, we undertake a risk and opportunity assessment. Fourth, assessing peace and conflict impacts. And the last one is enhancing the intervention. So now we go on to the culture of peace. So what is this culture of peace? First, let us describe what is culture. It is in many definitions that culture as understood in culture of peace are sets of attitudes, values, goals, and practices, customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of each of everyday existence or a way of life shared by people in a place or time. What is culture of peace? Following the two important UN resolutions, the Program of Action on a Culture of Peace, which adopted in 1999, and the 1998 UN Resolution on the Culture of Peace, the United Nations defined culture of peace as all values, attitudes, and forms of behavior that respect for life, unity, human dignity, for all human rights, the rejection of violence in all its forms, and community commitment to the principles of freedom, justice, solidarity, and understanding between people. The UNESCO pinned that since wars begin in the minds of men, It is also in the minds of men that peace should be constructed. But let me just clarify that men referred to in the quote refers to all human as a whole and not only concerns males, guys, or dudes. It refers to all men, women, and even in between. Now we move on to the peace education. So it is in the analysis that supported the need to educate and inculcate peace principles in the early formative years of the children. Thus, peace education intends to contribute a better awareness of the root causes of conflicts, violence, and peacefulness at the personal, interpersonal, community, national, regional, international, and even at global levels. It also aims to cultivate values and attitudes that will encourage the individual and social actions in peace building more peaceful selves, families, communities, and societies, and ultimately a peaceful world. Humorously quoting a famous Miss Universe pageant response in a question and answer portion, we all want to have a world peace. Now let's move on to the Executive Order 570, or the institutionalization of peace education in basic education and teacher education. The EO 570 recognizes the important role of the education sector in promoting and ensuring sustainable peace. By integrating the values and skills relating to promoting peace into the regular subjects being taught not just in elementary but high school, we are making something concrete towards breaking the cycle of violence in our society, which is rooted in the people's values and their ability to respond peacefully to conflicts which are inevitable because people will always be different. By integrating peace education into the curriculum of teacher education, we are able to prepare would-be teachers to teach about peace. Both are strategic action towards building and nurturing an environment conducive to peace. To provide you with the understanding on how education for a culture of peace is imparted, I will be showing you a six petal flower to represent and emphasize the six themes of culture of peace. First petal is dismantling the culture of war. So to promote a culture of peace, it is encouraged showing more positive images or symbolic manifestations of peace. For example, just in time for Christmas gift giving, instead of giving toy guns, bladed weapons, and toys like likening to violence, give gifts such as educational toys or sports to promote values such as learning and sportsmanship. Next is living with compassion and justice. By expressing empathy and sympathy to others and showing fairness and impartiality in your everyday life decisions and activities. The third is building intercultural respect, reconciliation, and solidarity. To live and build harmonious relationships among different cultures by respecting each other beliefs, religions, and culture. Promoting gender sensitivity, anti-racism, and anti-discrimination in all forms is also an example of building intercultural respect. Fourth is promoting human rights and responsibilities. By considering that each human being has rights, whether civil, political, economic, social, and cultural, each of us has a responsibility to ensure that we respect and promote them rather than violate them and to promote a peaceful society. The fifth one is living in harmony with the earth. How each of us, even in our little way, will contribute in the preservation of our environment through our lifestyles, fostering a peaceful people-planet relationship by practicing waste segregation and also by recycling. And then the last one is cultivating the inner peace. This is the most important way of living, as how can we give peace to others, to the communities, and to our society if in our own selves we don't have an inner peace. In nurturing our inner peace, each of us must cultivate a deep sense of spirituality, beginning with our relationship with God, our own self, and within our own family. So, this metaphor of a flower emphasizes the interconnectedness of each of the themes to form an organic whole, which is the culture of peace. So I'd like to end this by saying that if we want to build a lasting peace, we really have to ensure that we prepare the environment for the next generation to sustain our efforts today. We can only do that if we educate them on the value of peace and if we equip them with the necessary skills that will guide them to always choose peaceful responses to every small and big conflict that can really be avoided. So, as quoted by Mahatma Gandhi, if we wish to have lasting peace, we must start with the children. So, maraming salamat po muli at magandang umaga.